Two American soldiers have been taken into custody. Both are at grave risk of being used as props by Putin in the very same way, and the U.S. State Department saw it coming. They warned Americans not to go to Ukraine to fight, and they reiterated that warning today, telling us, quote, "We also once again reiterate U.S. citizens should not travel to Ukraine due to the active armed conflict and the singling out of U.S. citizens in Ukraine by Russian government security officials." But despite warnings like that from the State Department, dozens still went to Ukraine to fight, and the media often glorified those who took up the cause. The U.S. government can't even get Brittany Griner back, and all she allegedly did was carry some THC oil in her bag. What chance do we have of getting soldiers back who are fighting against Russia? Let me be clear. It was incredibly brave for Druki and Wynne to go over to Ukraine and fight. They are far braver than I will ever be. But as much as they and others want to help Ukraine, the folks in the media in particular have got to understand the enormous dangers. We need to amplify the message from the State Department that they absolutely should not join the battle on the ground. Joining us now is Christian Witten, a senior fellow at the Center for the National Interest. He served as a senior advisor in the State Department of both the George W. Bush and Trump administrations. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it. All right, assuming that the information is accurate, what happens now? Will they try to back-channel negotiations? Is there even such thing right now?
There probably isn't such a thing right now, at least not in an effective way. There is a Russian ambassador to the United States, although he really doesn't have much access right now. He certainly isn't seeing the president or the vice president or the secretary of state. In fact, he's probably quite irritated. The FBI has been trying aggressively using social media to get his employees to defect or to spy for the U.S. on him. Similarly, the U.S. ambassador in Russia, John Sullivan, doesn't have much access right now to his counterparts. We do have a person at the State Department who's in charge of hostage issues, but more likely this will result in a show trial and a sentence, and any negotiation probably will be kicked down the road a little bit until actual negotiations between Ukraine and Russia take place to end the war.
Now, is there any way to sort of enlist a third party, some sort of potential broker, Israel, whoever that might be?
Mm-hmm. There is, and certainly we've done that in other instances. For example, with Americans who, against the advice of the government, have gone and traveled to North Korea and been taken prisoner there. Then sometimes in that instance, Sweden, for example, is our protecting power since we don't have diplomatic relations. So they were the ones who would be in contact, or you can go contact North Korea sometimes through the UN. The problem with Russia right now is there's not a perfectly clear example of that. Neutral countries like Sweden and Finland actually are not going to be neutral, or at least don't want to be neutral for very long. They've applied for membership to NATO. There are countries like Switzerland, but there are countries that do have normal relations with Russia and influence. You mentioned Israel. India might be another one. But with the situation being so tense and with Russia seeing itself as at war with the United States, even though we're just providing money and arms and possibly intelligence, it's unlikely this is going to just clear itself up in a trade of 2 Russian soldiers for the 2 Americans.
And one would expect that before anything happens, that Putin's going to try to use them, if it happened, as some sort of propaganda tool, right?
Right, that's very likely. With the 2 Brits who were sentenced to death for being mercenaries, that was a court in Donetsk, the Donetsk People's Republic, the breakaway republic that's growing. And it's unclear if who actually would manage a show trial in this instance, if they would have one of those 2 local governments or whether it would be Russia. Under the Geneva Convention, these 2 probably aren't actually mercenaries. To qualify as a mercenary and therefore not be protected by the convention, typically you have to be paid a significant sum over what a soldier would be paid. All indications are these are just volunteers, so specifically not mercenaries. That probably though isn't going to stop the Russians.
Right. I was just going to say you're applying a rational analysis to what I'm certain is going to be, an irrational assessment. Christian Witten, thank you so much for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.